oftentimes you see in organizations this idea that, well, if we switch platforms or we migrate, to this thing or we change that, then all of our problems will be solved and everything will be amazing. And then our strategy will work. And, what I often find is that, there's a lot more failures of strategy than there is of technology, right? Just to keep it very real.
Some organizations can get really fixated on what will the community do for us, but really the community is for the community members. You have to create a mutualistic symbiotic relationship where they're going to want to come. They're going to want to spend time there, contribute. So you really have to focus on doing things for the members and showing their value so that they can, build value back into your business. You can't be totally focused on the business needs.
You end up making a decision on the whim sometimes. Okay, this is the platform we're going to go with, but maybe for cost reasons, maybe for the features, etc. But it is really important to pick your platform based on the target group that you're catering to. Where are your community members? What is going to be comfortable for them, and are they actually going to be using the community space that you're creating for them?
Just want to quickly welcome you all to another session of these events by LikeMinds, where we gather community experts. We gather different topics that a lot of community builders want to learn on, and we try to match these topics with the right experts. Quickly want to introduce myself. I'm the founder and CEO of LikeMinds. At LikeMinds, we help app-first companies build community experiences, into their existing apps without taking a lot of engineering bandwidth. I've heard a lot from not just community builders, but also a lot of founders, a lot of growth leaders when they are thinking of building a community team. A lot of them would start on a platform which is not the best one, let's say for long term. A lot of people start on Slack, a lot of people start on WhatsApp, a lot of people start on Facebook, and over time you realize that, you've outgrown the platform, and that's when the need arises of looking for an alternative. And this journey continues. I think in a lot of cases, even if you've chosen a platform which is a proper community platform, even then, community is a living entity, and it keeps changing its DNA also over time. So a lot of people find this question in their journey of community building, that what is the best way to migrate a community from one platform to the other platform, and which is exactly what we are trying to, find answers for today. And, I have three amazing guests with me, who will help us find answers of this question. I want to invite Brian Oblinger, first on stage. Brian has been one of the most senior voices in community building across the globe. I think it's been about 3 decades since Brian has been building communities. He has done customer experience and success to community. He's donned many hats across ventures like Alteryx and Comsor, and currently spreading his knowledge through Community Strategy Academy, while he's also helping brands unlock the ROI for their communities as an independent consultant. Welcome, Brian. Super happy to see you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let me invite my next guest, Mark. Mark Schwanke is another senior community professional with us today, with names such as Motorola, ADP under his belt. He likes to call himself a customer happiness facilitator. And based on my interactions with him so far, I believe he's the perfect person to learn from about how to build deep relations with your users' community. Mark is consulting ventures on delivering more than perfect customer support through communities. So feel free to hit him up whenever you need any guidance. And from what I heard, I think Mark had done community platform migration not once, not twice, not thrice, but I think 5 times. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, I think about 5 times. It's mostly with enterprise. So, and great job on pronouncing my last name.
Thank you. Awesome. That brings me to the final guest for the night or the day in the US. I have known, this guest, for the longest. I think so. It's not just while I see Mark and Brian from a very different lens, I'm proud to have a friend who I've met multiple times now. Also sharing sharing her views on this topic. So glad to have Madhurima here. Her experience of building and nurturing communities from ground up and her data-driven approach is something that I personally found very helpful. She's shown a lot of talent while she worked at My Captain. Sometime back we also hosted the founder of My Captain in one of the events. One of the most impressive thing about My Captain that I remember was how they improved their NPS using community, and that stuck with me. Zishan was like, it's all Maddie. So I'm so glad to have Madhurima here. And post My Captain, she worked at 5X, which was a data company, and now she is doing community consulting full time. So if anyone is looking for views on how to go 0 to 1, which is her sort of niche into community consulting as well, hit her up.
Thanks, Nirkan. This is exciting, and obviously I've been fangirling over Brian and Mark, so super excited to be having this conversation with them and learning from them as well. But happy to contribute. Thanks for inviting me, Nirkan.
Awesome. Cool, great. Let's get started. So, I want to know from Brian, I think that one of the first and the foremost important thing whenever anyone is thinking of, deciding a community platform is, should you even migrate? Like, what are the signs that you would take for whether, I should migrate or not?
Yeah, let me just back up real quick and say that one of the things I see or have seen over the last, however many years it's been, is that a lot of times, we sort of we fail at strategy or tactics, and we blame vendors, right? Or we blame technology, or we blame platforms. And oftentimes you see in organizations this idea that, well, if we switch platforms or we migrate, to this thing, or we change that, then all of our problems will be solved and everything will be amazing. And then our strategy will work. And, what I often find is that, there's a lot more failures of strategy than there is of technology, right? Just to keep it very real. And so I want people to pay very close attention to that, before we talk about technology. I do think, there are clear reasons to migrate, right? It's not that there isn't. Typically, some of those reasons would include you've outgrown your existing platform. We see this all the time, right? With Slack and Discord and things like that. People start on those and then they sort of hit the magical barrier of 3,000 to 5,000 people, and it all starts to kind of break down a little bit. So there's the outgrowth. There is, technical requirements from the business. Those could be things like security. Those could be, integrations that are needed that, depending on the platform you're on, they may just not have that functionality. And so you're in search of that. And then kind of to Mark's moniker of happiness, a lot of times these things are driven by, we want to build a better experience for our customers, right? Maybe our existing strategy is working just fine, but we know that we can go to another level if we have a much better overall experience. And so, those are some of the reasons why I've seen people, kind of go out and explore this. But I do want to caution people, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just to kind of end my little bit here is that migrations are hard, right? They take a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's going to derail your entire community strategy for months, if not, like in the world that Mark and I come from, like enterprise communities, a migration could derail your community strategy for a year or more, depending on the situation. So it's something that if you have to do or you need to do, by all means, knock yourself out, go for it. But I think you have to really weigh the consequences and sort of the opportunity cost strategically of, is this actually going to move us forward, or are we just going to kind of reset ourselves back in time and have to start over again, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think one of the common reasons that I've seen, at least the Indian audience, which is heavily relying on WhatsApp, move out of WhatsApp is, like you said, the number of users, but a lot of it is also, privacy of their users' phone numbers, which continues to be a big challenge with WhatsApp. Mark, what's your thought on this? Having done it 5 times, what was the most common reason for migration, in your experience?
So a couple times it was because the platform was of end of life. And so there was a necessity to move. A couple times it has been, we owned other like CRM on the tool, and they also had a community platform. So we moved just to do a cost reduction and have closer integration points, not needing to build a whole bunch of additional integrations. And then there have also been times where there was an open source platform that the community was originally built on, and we just needed to move to something that was enterprise level, HIPAA compliant, was still getting enhancements and that kind of thing, and really scaled to a level that we needed it to. So most of mine, have been for those reasons. I haven't really chosen just on a whim and moving to a platform that I wanted. Certainly we did our due diligence and looked through the various platforms that were available at that time. I am both a front-end community manager and an admin, so I have a lot of that configuration experience, dip my fingers in the data schema as well to create those connection points. I don't have experience with really moving WhatsApp communities, but certainly I can come up with lots of ideas why that may be a thing, but I think we'll get to a little bit more about caution about moving later in the talk. Maddie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just one. I think you both have covered pretty much everything, but just one, the target group that we work with, right? You end up making a decision on the whim sometimes. Okay, this is the platform we're going to go with, but maybe for cost reasons, maybe for the features, etc. But it is really important to pick your platform based on the target group that you're catering to. Where are your community members? What is going to be comfortable for them, and are they actually going to be using the community space that you're creating for them? So I think one of the experience that we had, like we had to switch from Slack to Discord, was because people just couldn't understand how to join a workspace. They ended up creating their own workspaces instead of joining a workspace. So that was because our target group is more used to Discord. They were already there. So this is a big, I would say, blunder. Rather, we just didn't consider it, and then so we had to move. We had to move to where they actually were. So.
Interesting.
I wanted to, if I could real quick, one thing I want to just say, because they, like Mark and Maddie both mentioned, I think it's important to very specifically call out, is this concept of cost, right? Because oftentimes we do find ourselves in situations where, especially in the more kind of on the enterprise side, where we're on these huge kind of enterprisey platforms with really big price tags. And to Mark's point and Maddie's point, sometimes you hear people say, well, the business is cutting back, or there's been a decision made about, we need to move to a less expensive platform, right? And that might be the case. Like you may actually, be able to save some money by moving to a platform. But what I've actually seen is that you spend so much time and money and resources, and maybe you have to hire a developer and like all these kinds of things to migrate from the expensive platform to the cheap platform, that in the end, it's a wash, right? You actually didn't say. In fact, you might actually spend more in sort of the migration, and even if it's just a one-time fee to do that. So I would say it's not always the case, but I would just be really careful, right? I think to both their points about like, sometimes we think we're saving money by moving. When you run the numbers afterwards, you sort of realize that you went through 6 months of pain to save, $13.70 or whatever. So, I think we have to be really careful about that. And people need to really understand, like, before you make the choice, what does it cost? What are the unforeseen things that are going to happen? Who am I going to have to pay? What happens if things go sideways? Otherwise, we just end up doing this huge migration and don't actually end up achieving the goal of saving money.
Yeah, I think one more point to add maybe is that you have the migration cost, you have the total cost of ownership, the annual subscription, and then you might have the cost of enhancements, be it when you migrate, not necessarily being a migration cost, but just an enhancement cost, and then also bringing back a feature. Let's say you built something very custom on your current platform, and it doesn't have it out of the box on your new platform. You may have to build that to make your members happy. So there's really a lot of cost there. And then the cost that a lot of people don't see is the cost of just reorienting people to the community, getting them comfortable. You lose all of that activity often with your migrations. There's only one migration I've ever done where the activity, like the likes and views, and that was maintained. All of the migrations I did, all that data was lost. And so that is a very painful thing. And then your long runway after you migrate to just, having care for the community members and helping them feel comfortable on that new platform. So that's not necessarily a monetary cost, but a cost of time and resources.
Yeah. My last sort of nudge on the whole decision-making process, like what are the top 3, let's say, questions that, you guys would ask while selecting a platform? And like, do you think like customization plays an important role in that decision? So, Maddie, you want to start with that?
Sure. So I haven't. It is in the communities that I have built, we haven't reached this place where it's too big for customizations. But what I would talk about is how important it was for us to really figure out if it is easy for people to join. Like we didn't want to make that a burden for them. And second, the tool had to have space for us to sort of add that. Sort of build the architecture for ourselves. Like I didn't want an off-the-shelf thing. Although let's say Discord has a lot of features, but simple things like how do I name the channels? How do I have these? How do I use the features that are available? So these things had to be, because at the end of the day, people who come to your community are not looking to learn how to use the tool, but they need to know how to use the community. They need to make the best use of the community that you're building, the platform that you're building for them to feel like part of the community. So I think these two things, one is how easy or difficult is it for them to enter the space. It shouldn't be very difficult. And second is the features. Can I make it more, can I make it just user friendly? Can I make it very, very easy for the members to understand how to make the best use of it?
Sure. So ease of use of features and low barrier to join the community platform. What would be yours, Mark?
So I would, the best communities that I've used, they've always had a very active community manager community or developer community. So I would really want to look at that. I would want to know if there is any foreseen future acquisition. There's actually been 2 times where the community platform that I just moved to was acquired not long after, and that really threw a wrench in things. So knowing that, I know it seems kind of like an odd question to ask, but having been through it, it was really disruptive. And then, are they willing to do kind of a proof of concept? I did a large move at the last organization I was at. I'm currently looking for new opportunities, by the way. And we worked with Lithium and Jive at the time, and they did proof of concept to really show and let us kick the tires because we had a lot of data from back in 2008. At the time where it was about 2016. So there was a lot of data. So I think it's really important. If you have a lot of data, if you're an enterprise client, you have to decide, are you going to move all the data and really know if the company can do that? The reason I bring that to a point is in one of my last migrations, we had actually gone through about 4 to 5 months of a migration and had moved about 2 years of data. And then they said, we can't migrate all your data. And that was one of our table stakes about moving, that they had to move all the data. So we actually had to quickly pivot and migrate in about a month and a half the community to a different platform, even though we had gone through this whole process of acquisition. So can they hold the data that you're wanting to move?
Sure. Brian, what would be your top questions?
I think we've covered most of them. I think we just need to be honest we need to be honest with ourselves and also with our community about what the trade-offs are, right? Like every time I see a migration announcement, it's always, the old platform was trash and the new one's perfect and it's going to be amazing and you're all going to love it, right? And then we move people over. Everything is a series of trade-offs, right? And we have to be honest about that and say, hey, there's probably some things you liked about the last platform. There's probably some things you didn't like. And the same is going to be true on the new one. And we're maybe just going to switch those around, what those are. I think where people get in trouble is just not being clear and transparent about that and being overly kind of rosy and everything's going to be amazing now. And, I think people set like really bad expectations with their communities in that way. And that's one of the things that leads to trouble, with migration. So I think we've covered most of the questions, but it does come down to like, are we actually making this a better experience? Is this actually going to be better? And sometimes the answer might be no, because if it's like for cost or something, we might just be forced into it and we know that it's not going to be better. Not a great situation, but like we should probably just be honest about that instead of lying to ourselves and everybody else that, somehow what we're doing is, if it's for cost reasons, it's for cost reasons, right?
Yeah. See, in a lot of cases, let's say the end users, because they don't want to move to a new platform, they are used to, let's say, Slack or Discord or WhatsApp. And it's not their problem that the community has outgrown the scale, right? So a lot of them would want to stay on those platforms. But, for the company or the community builder, it just becomes operationally, more and more difficult to manage those conversations. What would you do in those situations? Like, would you still, Brian, this is for you, would you still say that, hey, even though it's not the best thing that our users want, but it's not just operationally feasible for me to continue running it on Slack, would you like bite that argument?
Yeah, I think the Slack thing's a perfect example because one of the core, as we all know, right, one of the core reasons why people move from Slack to a more traditional community platform is SEO, right? There are some tools that can help you, get Google to index Slack conversations and that sort of thing, but it's not ideal, right? It's not the same. And so this is a great example of like, how do we balance that, what customers want and that user experience with what our goals are, for this community? Is it growth? Is it to make it easier to, expose these things to people through search. And I think, just talking with your community and saying, again, being very open and honest and saying, look, we get that this is going to be different than what we've had before, and you were here for certain reasons and that sort of thing. To Mark's point before, there's a reason why when you migrate communities, you can lose like up to a third or more of your traffic, and then you have to try and build it back. And you just have to be ready for that and kind of factor that into your plans for migration. Understand that you can't please everybody, right? Not everybody's going to be thrilled with the decision you make, but you have to make a decision with some conviction based on whatever you think is right for the community. So it's a tough balance. It's a hard thing to do. But I would say just be open and honest with your community. Try to bring them along for that ride. And at the end of it all, if some people don't like it or they liked it the way it was or whatever, it's, as I always say, the clock only moves one direction, right? We can't go back. So it's a difficult situation, but that's part of why, we're urging caution around these things, is not to say don't do it, but just make sure you've thought about all of these things and have plans for it, right?
Yeah.
I think to kind of grease the wheels, if you can get your super users, your ambassadors on board and involved in the decision, or at least kind of viewing and kind of previewing things so that they get comfortable, so they can be your ambassadors on the next platform. If it's a move you have to make, that will help them make other people comfortable with the platform. It'll get them, ready to go and interacting with people and helping them like teach other people to kind of share that knowledge right away. As far as management, I think you need to be very transparent with them that you're going to see a huge dip in activity, and it may be up to a year after things finally recover, and that's with a lot of attention paid to those members depending on the demographic of your group. So I think that's really important. Transparency, as Brian said, is really important, and being as transparent as possible. Sometimes you may have a legal team that says, no, we don't want you to divulge those things, but really push the envelope to see what you can say, because credibility is key. It takes a long time to build credibility on a community, and if you lose it, you may never get it back. So that's a real cost to the community manager if you're asked to say things that aren't quite the truth. So I'd really push for as much transparency as possible. People are very forgiving if they feel you're genuinely transparent.
Yeah. And just to add here, like communication, as transparency, communication, all of this is great, but it's all about also like just knowing that you don't have, you shouldn't ideally migrate all at once. You do it in phases. You don't push the whole just community out to your new platform. You do it in phases. As Mark said, first gain trust of your ambassadors. You have your superstars who are actually going to test it out, who are going to give you very, very critical feedback as to what is working, what is not working, and you get to learn a lot from that as well. So plan it out, plan the phases, and then sort of think about migrating in those phases.
Talking about community feedback and like strategies to make sure that the migration is smooth. Anything else that comes to your mind, guys? Maybe Brian, like anything specific to the strategy that you can use pre-migration and during migration. Like one very tactical thing that we just heard is like like communicate probably one-on-one with your inner circle. Like get them by the decision. Anything else that has worked in the migration process? Any strategy?
I think working a very strong process about content migration to make sure that you're really buttoned up through automated testing, do several cycles, kind of really understand how long the actual migration day will take. Often when you're doing an enterprise migration, if you're going to stay on the same URL. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. Is to find out, through the process, are you going to be able to have your current community online? Are you going to have to change it to read only? Is everything going to have to come down? Like there'll just be a maintenance page that may then have an effect on your call center, or other support channels if you're a support community. So really talking with the various people within your organization, to let them know, hey, this is going to be happening. This is what we see as the potential things that are happening during those times, and really being transparent with people about what content they expect to see after the migration. I've done migrations where the data migration didn't go so well and there was a lot of cleanup after, and I've done ones that are almost flawless. Certainly the nearly flawless ones came after my first attempts, but really being buttoned up on that data migration can make all the difference.
Yeah. And how do you, before I move to the next question, Brian, do you have anything to add on the previous one?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered kind of the main points that I would normally suggest for people on this.
Sure. So how do you, maintain engagement during migration, or should you rather focus on doing that? Like your metrics will of course go down. Is that something that community managers should worry about?
Oh, they should absolutely worry about it.
Absolutely.
I think to Maddie's point earlier, you're going to have some process, whatever it is, there's a bunch of different ways that a migration can go down. Process wise, I think, as we keep saying, it's all about the communication to your members. Here's what's going to happen. Here's when it's going to happen. I'll communicate with you at that time. If something goes wrong and we have to delay or push, or the whole thing's down for a little while, like whatever it is, we just need to be really, really, because you're going to lose a certain amount of people anyway, like even if you're really good at this, right? So you have to understand that it really becomes paramount for you to communicate and be, help them understand what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to go down, and how they can be part of it to try and retain as many people as possible. And then make it easy for them to, once you are cut over to the new environment, whatever that is, help them, claim their account or, whatever that, there's usually a process on that end of it, perhaps. So I think it's just all about that like expectation setting, and then communication. And ultimately, as Mark said earlier, people will give you some leeway, if you are open and transparent, but that there's a finite amount of that leeway too, I would say. And so you have to just hope that things go well and do your best, and from there, some of the technical stuff's out of your control.
Sure. Maddie, anything technical? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I think one thing important to add that can really determine if your community starts to recover quickly or not is if it's possible during your migration to set a requirement where your subscriptions to existing discussions are maintained through a migration. I've had instances where it wasn't possible to carry over that subscription. So, when the community comes live again, if people are, responding to very busy discussions that have, sometimes thousands of people subscribed to a discussion, there's thousands of comments, and that someone makes a comment and then there's no one there. There's no one that even after the discussion, unless they log in, that conversation continued. So if you can migrate those subscriptions where people then get notifications, hey, this comment was made post-migration, that can help get that wheel moving again, to get people to log in just because they got a notification or they were mentioned or whatever. If you don't have that, it can make it almost be a radio silence unless you send an email like, hey, the community's live again, come check it out. I would caution right after migration, I would only send it to a portion of your members that may be logged in the last 7 days prior to migration, just so you kind of get a sense of, hey, can the new platform handle, the people logging on before you send it to a large group. If you're sending it to 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people, and then you find out, hey, there's this big data issue with posts are in the wrong place. You don't want to show all the negative things if you can avoid it. So hold a little close to the cuff.
Maddie, I was coming
Yes.
this specific example that you had shared earlier. At My Captain, you guys moved from Slack to Discord. You talked about getting some of your active members to test the platform. Any other tactical stuff that you guys did in that process?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we had phases, right? So our first phase were, just like 80 to 100 people moving with us, and they were essentially our testers. So we had to, keep our community architecture ready. We had the whole new platform ready, but of course we were very flexible with how things would work because we needed feedback from our members themselves. So we had that cohort. They were being engaged on the new platform, but at the same time, we had to engage the rest of the community on our older platform as well. That was very important. And I'm not just talking in terms of the metrics and everything, of course, that's important, but in terms of the value that we were already providing to the members, and suddenly if you see it's going down, they're not going to stay back with you anymore. They shouldn't feel like, okay, people are just like, not caring about us. Although they've been communicated to about this change that's going to happen, they shouldn't feel like, okay, we are not a priority anymore. But I think two things, like two actionable steps that I'm going to tell you all here that sort of really helped us is one, set a date. And send out save the dates. I'm not even kidding. Say that, okay, within 2 months, we're going to be moving out of this platform. Within 3 months, whatever, you figure out how much time it's going to take. Keep communicating that, but make sure you communicate also in terms of, okay, how this new platform is going to be better. How are some people already using it for a better, comparatively to what they've been doing in this current platform. And have this communication going out on a regular basis. At the same time, maintain the similar level of engagement that you had previously. Otherwise, it's not gonna sit in well with your members. So yeah, these three things would be very important.
Got it. Brian, Mark, any example that you guys can take from your migrations and think of any of the specific tactic that gave a lot of comfort to the users in terms of engaging and migrating to a new platform?
Yeah. Not a specific story, but yeah, I think just getting the information out there, kind of teasing a little bit the new community. If there's something a feature that you haven't been able to bring them on the current platform, if you're able to bring them a wanted feature on your new platform, is to tease that and show that you're working on something that matters to them. Some organizations can get really fixated on what will the community do for us, but really the community is for the community members. You have to create a mutualistic symbiotic relationship where they're going to want to come. They're going to want to spend time there, contribute. So you really have to focus on doing things for the members and showing their value so that they can, build value back into your business. You can't be totally focused on the business needs. I think it's the community manager's, job to find those commonalities as well.
Yeah. Become the bridge between the business and the users. Cool. My next question is, how do you approach reducing the friction in terms of training users on the new platform? Do you guys prefer doing an online event around it, or more written stuff? Anything specific on that, Brian?
All of the above, all the time. Right. I think if you're moving to something like Discord or Slack or WhatsApp, the likelihood is high that they already have a familiarity with it and you won't have to do as much training or enablement, which is good. But I think in general, you never want to assume that, you never want to assume that, so easy, anyone can do it and people are going to move over. I think, videos, events, FAQs, like I would do everything and sort of run people out of excuses to not know how to use your new platform, whatever it is. And even then, some people are still going to say, I don't get it, or I couldn't get in, or, whatever. And then you kind of have to figure out what to do in those situations. So yeah, my basic advice is to do as much of that as you can, in as many formats and modalities as you can, just to try and help as many people as possible make the switch and feel comfortable. No matter what you do, though, there's always going to be some contingent of people that either because they had a preconceived notion about the move or the new platform, or they have legitimate issues. There's sort of a spectrum of that, with people. You're going to have people. It's just the way it is. And so, as much content as you create and as many sessions as you do and all of this, you have to be ready to also perhaps do some one-on-one hand holding, or just be ready to lose some people. Like some people are just going to decide that, I'm mad about this and I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And I'm going to complain really loudly about it. And that is just sort of the, I guess, built-in cost sometimes of doing this. Right. So, yeah, that'd be my advice, but I would prepare for some churn.
Cool.
I think, you got to look at, you're migrating some people, and other people are going to be joining probably for the first time. So much of what Brian said, I have actually used digital adoption platforms, and looked at quite a few with the last community I ran, just because our community was a demographic of older folks that didn't have a lot of experience on online community, so they need a little more handholding. Holding like Ask Me Anything sessions where people can just come on and join a Zoom and ask questions, and you can kind of run them through the new platform is great as well. So really looking at what's important to your members. I know Rich Millington isn't big on the digital adoption platforms, but I think in some cases, when used properly, with the right digital adoption platform, a lot of them are focused more on like training. Various websites, not many are catered to online communities. So if you can get a digital adoption platform that's working towards communities, that can really be a differentiator for you to help onboard people and make them feel more comfortable. And even getting your ambassadors to make their own kind of viewpoint from a customer's perspective. You have your super users. They may use the community in a way that you don't really that you're not even really aware of. Me as a community manager, I'm in the admin view most of the time. I don't go into the user view. So how I utilize the community and use different functions may be completely different from a new member versus a sometimes active member versus a super user. There may be completely different personas. So think of it in that way if you can.
Yeah. Patty, I remember in our pre-event catch-up, you were talking about exactly this, right? Like how you guys discovered that your super users actually helped you architect the community platform better than what you had anticipated. You want to talk about it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I know I keep coming back to the same, I'm parroting the same thing, but it's super, super important to sort of design, visualize, and test out your community architecture. It's easier to just, assume that certain things are going to work, but it won't. And it is also just go in with a very open mind that you don't know everything about this new tool as well. You might be a bit more aware about it, but you don't know everything. Your members are going to figure it out for themselves. It's a good thing. So when we moved from Slack to Discord, I think a lot of our members came up with suggestions of certain bots they wanted integrated because it's going to help them, let's say, interact with each other much better. They just, simple suggestions that when it comes from the members, that means, you've had a successful migration for sure, because they've gone out, explored the platform for themselves, they've started liking it, and they have identified things that they actually need for a better experience for themselves in this, and to sort of have a better community experience. So I think, just go with an open mind when you're migrating.
Cool. let me move to the post-migration phase. Let me start with, I think, where Brian mentioned earlier, 1/3 of your users are not going to migrate. Is that a benchmark, Brian? Like, do you think a community manager should be happy if, let's say, 66% of the users migrate?
I think it's really dependent on community and your audience and the platform and how you've orchestrated. I think there's a lot of factors. I just say that number because I have seen that again, that's more in the enterprise world. I suspect that if you're moving WhatsApp communities and things like that, the rate is probably much, much lower, would be my guess. I think regardless of what the number is, I think you need to prepare your stakeholders or whoever that is to understand that that's part of the decision-making process of migrating, right? If we're going to do this, there's a risk, right? That we're going to lose some people. But the hope is that we're going somewhere better for a reason that matches our strategy better and will give our users, better functionality. And to Mark's point, maybe you gain a whole bunch of people that didn't even know your community existed before as a result of that move. But there's still sort of a time delta there somewhere of, it's going to be a big drop in your metrics and then a slow build back up and then eventually it's higher. So I think it's really, again, sort of like that expectation setting with whoever, kind of the stakeholders or champions are of this thing to say, this is what happens in migrations. I don't know exactly what the number will be, but there will be some. It's just kind of the nature of moving.
And what's the typical time period that you should ask from the management that, when the dip will sort of start going up? Like, is there a time period that you should negotiate for the minimum?
I think it depends what your post-migration plan looks like and what kind of programs do you have in place to bring people back or get new people. I don't know if there's a particular benchmark, on that. And again, it's probably very different between communities and audiences and platforms.
Right.
And ultimately, that's probably up to you, I would say, as a community manager to put together a package of programs and then communicate what you think, that timeline is going to look like. But as I said before, some people are never coming back, right? And so the question is, how do we get new people, and sort of grow in that way? And like, maybe that's a goal of your migration or maybe it's not. It depends, this is a lot easier to do in open communities, right? Than it is with closed communities. The timeline is probably much longer with like more closed private communities for that, whatever that gap of time frame is.
Yeah. Mark, from an enterprise perspective, what has been your typical timelines in migrations? Like you talked about it, earlier, it takes about a year, but from a success point of view, like how much time would you recommend, especially for an enterprise community, to have, as a patience and, to negotiate with the stakeholders?
Yeah, so I think really with your if you're able to move over those subscriptions to threads that people have been participating in, and you do a good job of creating redirects so that you get back into Google search results, so you're getting visibility there when people search their question on Google. If you have an open community, that can come back in 3 to 6 months potentially. If you don't have those notifications, it may take a year for things to really pick up. That's if you're lucky. So that's why we're cautioning you to be really, really careful about moving, just because of these things that you get flashed all these things of great things when you move to a new platform, but there's lots of things that you may not consider that it's like, oh crap, after the fact you're scrambling to do a fire drill and fix things. So I think conservatively probably a year is realistic. My comment previously about a year was I was really hand-holding some of the users just because of the older demographic of the last community I managed. helping them understand and feel comfortable. And these are, people who have been members for 8 years.
Sure.
It really depends.
Got it. Maddie, I think
yeah.
I remember in our pre-event catch-up, you were talking about you grew from, I think, 2,000 people on Slack or probably less to 5,000 on Discord. I don't know if, I just remember the order, right?
Yeah.
What, were there any specific things that you did post-migration to make that flywheel, that helped you grow that fast?
Yeah, absolutely. So the decision to move in itself was because we very clearly identified that there was a barrier to entry, right, on Slack, and it was an open community, so we had to make sure that it's easier for people to join. Although we had communication in the right places, we had nudges in the right places for people to be able to click on the link. But having said that, there is no way 100% of your community is going to migrate unless it's a very, very small, tight-knit community. So be very realistic about when you're making plans, and especially when you're having conversations with your relevant stakeholders. I think something that helped me is that because we were using Threado, a tool that helps with the community analytics, Threado was able to tell us exactly what is the percentage of inactive members, and we had defined this. So I was able to set those expectations with our team, saying that, hey, this percentage will definitely not move with us. And of course, in addition to that, plus minus, there will be there will be a churn, because we know there have been not just churn, there have been exits as well. There have been people who successfully moved on to a paid product because it was a free community that we were running. So I was able to distinguish that. So these are things that you can keep in mind when you're sort of setting expectations, and please don't be under any illusion that 100% of your community is going to move with you. They will not.
Yeah. And anything specific you did post migration to just continue that growth on the new platform?
So as I said, so we identify the barriers, right? So there were the platform itself was a barrier. Second, I think we made onboarding much more easier. So in the sense, we had communication going out to them, we had nudges going out to them. We made it easier for people to take an action in their first couple of days, for them to sort of, and I don't mean introducing themselves. I don't mean that. They don't. So in our community, we didn't really have to, have our members communicate about themselves, introduce themselves. Sorry. But because our community was built around proof of work, people were coming in because they wanted to improve their work. They wanted to see for themselves if a skill is something that they want to pick up, and for that they need to see themselves, they need to see their own work. So we created very, very small actions for them to take to feel good about themselves. Okay, great. Okay, I can do this. I'm progressing. Here's a very baby step that I'm taking. So these are things of course, this was happening in our previous platform as well, but because of the new features, I think we were able to enhance it much better. And luckily for us, I think post migration, I count it as after the whole cohort, the ambassador cohort has sort of settled in. I would call after they've settled in, I think only after that is proper post migration. And because they were able to give us so much feedback, we were ready for the larger batch to come join, and the newer ones, of course, we were ready for them. So yeah.
Got it. Cool. I think we are just running out of time. I want to move to the last, probably one or max two questions. Brian, this is for you. How do you see the trend, in online platforms and migrations evolving, with the whole community everywhere theme that is getting popular these days? What's your very, let's say, next 1 or 2 year view on that?
I think there's going to be a considerable amount of consolidation in the space. I mean, we're already seeing that, right? Gainsight bought Incited, Higher Logic bought Vanilla. We'll see what happens with our friends at Koros. Obviously, they're owned by private equity right now, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so that's one class, like at the high end. And then I think you have all of these community platforms and tools and things that were built sort of during the pandemic. And we're starting to see now some consolidation of those. Some are going away, some are partnering with people. So I think, what you're going to see is actually a contraction of the overall, kind of number of tools and platforms, which on one hand will make it easier for people to navigate, which ones to pick, and, that make it a little bit more clear. On the other hand, there's less choice, and, that causes some implications around pricing, right? So that's kind of my base guess, is that you're going to see, the consolidation. I do think, though, that, I've been waiting for someone to come along and sort of build the next generation platform. I think it's interesting what you're doing in that space for that reason. I think a lot of the platforms that we see built today, we're just rebuilding the same stuff over and over again, for the last 20 years. And I'm still, on the lookout, right, for someone to come in and sort of reimagine knowing what we know today, but also sort of building for the future. I have a bunch of ideas, about what that might be, but I think it's tough because, as we know, building platforms is at minimum a multi-year startup investment, and I think that's really hard, for people to do, kind of, especially in the existing, investment environment and stuff like that. So I think for community professionals, they can forget everything that I just said and not really worry about most of that, and just try to pick the best platform for their needs, for their budget, for the experience they're trying to build. Because ultimately, as Mark said, you want to do your homework and kind of know, I don't want to pick something that's going to be at risk in 6 months. But at the same time, you don't really, in most cases, you're not going to know, right? You wouldn't really, there'd be no indicators publicly of a lot of those things. So, just choose the best thing you can choose and build the best thing you can build. And if you have to move it again, or, get a new tool or add on something or build customizations or whatever down the road, then you do what you have to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Mark, any thoughts on that?
I think there's going to be some consolidation in other ways where some of the Salesforce has a community platform now. I think there's going to be probably some acquisition that in that regard where CRM companies are going to try to acquire community platforms to have closer integrations to kind of sell that part and parcel to their CRM products and other offerings. Koros has certainly done that. They brought in, Sprinkler not Sprinkler. I can't think of a company like Social Listening. So I think there's going to be some consolidation where community is more part of other platforms and there's close integrations so that there's not so much work in that regard. As far as features coming down the line, I think that probably digital adoption platforms and workflow automation is hopefully going to become more part of community product. I think there's a great opportunity for workflow automation. Some community platforms are already integrating that, and I see that as a real strength to community if there were more platforms offering workflow automation.
Yep. Maddie, any thoughts, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to take Indian perspective. We are very much behind, but I think we're just starting to realize the treasure that community building is. Brands, I think, because we Indians are naturally driven towards communities. That's how we have evolved as well. But I think brands starting to just about realize, startup founders taking that initiative to sort of think on a community line. We're going to take some time, but I see amazing talent in the industry coming up. It's really exciting space to be. And I think Brian and Mark, for you guys, probably 12 12 years ago where you were, that whole excitement of just starting out and, being in that space. I think that's where we are right now, and super excited. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think just to add on the Indian context, I think India is a lot more mobile first, and the needs are very different, and that's why we see a lot of these communities starting on WhatsApp instead of Slack and Discord. And a very common movement that I'm seeing is, especially for a mobile first audience, once these companies outgrow WhatsApp, there is no better channel, there is no better alternative. Like, I see that as a big gap even today. We are doing an attempt towards it, but like, I'm sure, if not us, there will be some solution for this. It's very, very open market in my view on the community platform space. Like, just get the mobile first audience built in. Yeah. Awesome. I think we are just about to end this. Thank you so much, everyone. It was lovely, just having a lot of interesting views on the platform, decision making, pre-migration strategy, during migration strategy, post-migration strategy. I loved the insights that we were able to generate from this session. And with that, I want to conclude this wonderful evening, at least for people in India. And I wish you a very amazing day if you're sitting out of US. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Maddie. It was lovely having you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
everybody.
Me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.